Are you looking to sharpen your command and leadership skills? The 2024 Blue Card Hazard Zone Conference is coming back to the Sharonville Convention Center in Cincinnati, Ohio, September 30th through October 4th. Immerse yourself in 5 days of targeted command education and leadership training at the 2024 Blue Card Hazard Zone Conference. This is your opportunity to recharge your command skills and stay at the forefront of incident command best practices. This year, we've added a certification lab, September 30th through October 2nd. Also added a Mayday workshop, October 1st to October 2nd. The General Conference is on October 3rd and 4th. The Mayday workshop is filling up fast, and our early bird pricing of $415 each for the General Conference is a limited time offer. Don't miss out on this opportunity. Register now at hazardzonebc.com.
You do. Hi-ho, and we do.
There should be a hook.
Why don't we get a parrot for his shoulder?
Arr. Arr me hardy.
I'll be the old mate that you always got to slap. Hey, where'd that old guy go?
What's the pirate's favorite letter? No, it's the sea he loves.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, that's a Terry Garrison joke right there. All right, we are into the B Shifter podcast. Welcome. It's John Vance, Nick Brunacini, Terry Garrison, and today we are talking about Bruno's hierarchy of engagement. It kind of goes along with a companion to an article that Terry just wrote in the B Shifter Buck Slip. So we thought we'd talk about that. Hey, one of the things we want to acknowledge, this is we have completed 3 years of podcasts with this podcast. So this is an anniversary podcast for us as well. So we've come a long way, baby.
Congratulations, Vance.
Congratulations to all of us.
So we've done about a podcast. You've done a podcast a week for 3 years
Yes.
now.
Yep.
Woohoo! That's over 150.
Yeah.
150.
We have about 140,000 downloads so far.
Tremendous.
And we're trucking.
And our first guest was
Don Abbott.
Don Abbott.
Yep.
And the Abbott Project.
Yes.
The May Days.
Yeah.
And Don's he's gone to the big dorm in the sky.
And we weren't even in this building yet. We were in the old building, and we were. We were audio only. We weren't on YouTube yet.
Yeah, well, it's baby stepping. You've baby stepped all the way from just voices to now images.
Just think if Don could have done that village he had. What was that called?
Abbottville.
Yeah, but what? Yeah, Abbottville.
Abbottville.
Could have done that on this with the. Oh, he would have held our attention.
You know, my favorite Don Abbott memory was we were doing the conference at Notre Dame, and he had a class in there, and somebody goes, "You got to go see what Abbott's doing," and he had a helmet on with a red light on top of it, and a headset, and it was some hazmat class or something. It's like, yeah. He might have lost it. I don't know.
Yeah.
That was the same one that we thought Vinny Dunn died. We couldn't find Vinny Dunn for like 2 hours.
Vinny Dunn went missing in Indiana.
He was taking a post-lunch nap, but we didn't realize
Perfect.
Yeah.
That would have been my first guess since I do that a lot.
Well, we knocked on his door. We looked
down.
we just couldn't wake him up.
Maybe he had Don's earphones on. He borrowed the helmet.
Thanks for the helmet, Don.
Earphones.
You know, the first time I met Abbott was at the training academy, and they had hired him to come in and do Abbottville, right? And so he's got this whole diorama set up in one of the big classrooms at the academy. And one of the scenarios he had, back then what Abbottville was, is he would recreate firefighter line of duty death incidents. And then he would play all the key characters that were affiliated with that incident. So anyway, I'm a captain, and I come in, and our company's there doing company training. And it's Abbottville, so we're doing our thing, and we're all standing there watching it and listening to them. And it's the first time I've ever seen this models, and I think, well, this is kind of neat. Blah 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 blah. And then he says, okay, we're going to run some scenarios. And, okay, who's going to be the IC? And so somehow I got pushed into the front. I was going to be the IC. Let's get the Chiefs, kid. We'll see here. Okay, great. So we come in and we're doing our thing. And it had to do with a railroad accident with a fire truck and some other stuff. So anyway, you're the BC and you get there and you're doing your thing. And Abbott had his railroad train hat on with his whistle. At first, he had been like a cop or something, and he had given you like the facts you needed to do the next part of the exercise. And then he disappeared, and he comes back out, and he's wearing his conductor hat and blowing that wooden train whistle, running around. And he comes up and he says, he keeps just chattering at you, and you're trying to do like you're assigning companies to do stuff, and he won't shut up. And I said, please be quiet and stand right there. And he would do it, and he'd stand there for like 10 seconds, and then he'd blow his whistle and start screwing with me again. And so finally looked at him and said, okay, Mr. Train Conductor, is there a police officer here? And he says, yes, as a matter of fact, he's right here. And he takes some guy who had been previewed to play the cop. And he says, here he is. And I said, okay, officer, I want you to arrest this man. And I was like, no, and they're dragging him off. He's blowing his whistle. And so we, like, with him being gone over 5 minutes, we were able to finish the whole drill. You know, that was supposed to go on another, like, 4 characters. So that was the first time I had met Don Abbott.
I did Abbottville in like 2002, and he played the abusive mayor. So he came in with the mayor hat. The hat said mayor on it. Yeah. And he's like, I'm going to fire you unless you talk to me right now. And he was that kind of mayor.
Nice.
He was the authority having jurisdiction mayor.
Yeah. These are the people in my neighborhood. Right?
What a
he
great
played them
guy.
all. He had fun.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Remember when we had the CTC going and we had the cubicles and they were playing a role, and he wanted to smoke it up and make it loud and heat them up with heat lamps, and thank God we were able to shut that
We
down.
came in, yeah, and we had already started training, so it had been open for a few months.
Yeah, it was open for a while.
And I come in, and because the shift commanders did all the training there, so it was kind of our training grounds, basically. So we'd come across the street and open it up and turn the lights on and fire up the computers. We're getting ready to do the thing. And Abbott is in the locker room is where all the sector kiosks were, right? And they were just like modular furniture with high, like, bar-style seating, and you sat at a kiosk. It was like a voting booth almost. And it had 3 sides around it, and then it had the monitor, and you're doing your thing. Yeah. Well, on the top of it, he had cut plywood to fit, and he was mounting that up, and he was going to hook heat lamps to it.
Yeah.
In fact, he had heat lamps already hooked up. Oh, no. And so there's like 8 heat lamps in this. It looked like you were going to electrocute people. And I said, Don, what are you doing? And he says, we're going to use these heat lamps to simulate the heat. And I said, well, no, the heat's implied. And if you're going to if it's going to be like flash over hot, just put a message on the screen that you're unable to operate too hot. Yeah. And he says, no, we're going to turn the heat up on them. And I said, well, when's the plumbing come in? And he said, plumbing? I said, well, are you going to squirt water at them next then through like the screen maybe? And he, oh, yeah, that would be great. I said, no, we're not going to do any of that, Don. I said, we're going to take all of this shit out of here right now. Oh, no, Nick, we're not. I said, oh, Don, we're shift commanders, and you're not wearing a shift commander shirt. Take this out now. And so I went outside with him and said, you can't do this. They're going to kill you. We just saved your life. I can guarantee that. Yeah. No, none of this. And I remember when we were building the place and putting it together, the fire chief had hired Abbott because they were old buddies. And so he said, we're going to do command training, and you have a lot of experience with this kind of thing, boom, boom, boom. Well, he was of the mind that we were going to have models everywhere, and it was going to be Abbottville recreated. Well, we had been teaching tactics for a long time, and it was all digital. And it was like simulations that we created, and you could have different conditions, and then, which you really can't do with models. I mean, you have to, it's a whole different thing.
You got a guy with a whistle.
Yeah, exactly. You thought, no, this is like high school drama theater, and that's we're doing IC1 is who we're training right now. So I remember there was a lot of back and forth with that for a little while the system was being done. And Abbott him and Bev had moved in, and they were remodeling the building as they lived there.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So Abbott would get up and he would start building models and things. Well, we were able to get him, and he wanted to do this anyway. He built an exact replica of our command van in the simulation floor, which was perfect. And then next to it, you had that cut down Suburban that we used for IC2. So and then IC1 were in the kiosk as mobile ICs. So once all those guys could come in and they could figure out what we were doing, because Abbott had a ton of models already. He had like downtown Phoenix built, and it took like most of the training floor to put it all out there.
Yeah.
And you thought, there's no way we were going to be able to use this, because you're going to need fire trucks and hose lines, and this is like
And
Army.
you couldn't get enough people around it.
No, you couldn't.
The classroom was limited by size.
And those things, those kind of diorama style simulators are great for a mixed responder audience, where you get the pissed off mayor and the police chief and the public works person. So they could all, because it shows them the scope of the thing. So when you say, no, there's 400 victims over here and there's this over here, and how are we going to, so then they can really start to make sense of it.
Visualize.
Well, what we're doing is we're simulating a bunch of stuff that we're all very familiar with, like house fires, small commercials, stuff like that. It's like, no, we don't. If you don't understand the standard actions that we take to do away with these standard conditions, you shouldn't be coming into this building.
And ours was more about decision making and communication. Those were like the big things.
Exactly.
And then it wasn't the tactics level. And, I guess we had some conversation on where you might park. And
we didn't change Terry, since we worked there, we didn't change our tactics 2 degrees in our whole life. All we did is sequence, order, reporting, and then building effective incident organizations. Because I think throughout our career, because it was all brand new command system when we started. Right. Well, and so it's always a work in progress. But at that point, it needed to be revised, and so it got revised throughout our career. And the last time was the Southwest Supermarkets, where that's where it really kind of blew up all at once. You're like, oh man, you talk about a house of cards with this thing. We can't do this anymore. So. In fact, that was the most uniting thing that ever happened during my career in the fire department with Southwest Supermarkets. It was a love fest. Like, you could have got Southwest Supermarkets would have settled the Middle East kind of thing. Right. But the effect that for 2 years, like, you couldn't tell the difference between the union president and the fire chief when they talked about strategy and tactics.
And we talked about it before, and really the reason why it didn't take a crazy right or a crazy left is because fire chief had us all visit the site.
Oh yeah,
away. Everybody was on the same page, because that could have went in any direction.
That was the most profound after action thing I ever did. Was that walkthrough? Absolutely. That changed. In fact, that made the next 5 years, but the 2 years following that is really where you were able to do a set of things that they couldn't unwrap. 20 years later, they couldn't unwrap. But you're never getting rid of on deck. It's just not going to happen.
Everybody shared that foxhole together.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Well, and then like true supervision and entry control with division bosses, and just kind of the way the system is really kind of designed to do your business. So, God bless Don Abbott, man. He was
very helpful.
He was part of the solution. Crazy. We were all crazy. Just different ways. So you just had to figure out what the whole group, how much crazy they could eat at the same time, and kind of stay on track. That place was unique in the fact that the best ICs came out of that experience, and they were the chief's aides. And that's where we made the decision as an organization to say we're not going to have safety officers, a traditional safety division anymore. Is the safety officer rides with the battalion chief. They're the battalion chief's partner.
The partnership.
And so that's where the safety truly got embedded on that task level of the thing. So, but we trained at the CTC, and we figured out the schedule after about the first session or two.
Right.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So once a week, each shift commander had a morning that they had to teach at the CTC.
Yeah, so instead of going to my job site at the fire station, we go there, you get your gear ready, but you go to the CTC, and then the other guy would hold over, John Henton or you or I would hold over, and the other guy would go directly to the CTC and teach there for the day. It worked. So Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, you were reporting to the CTC, and the same thing happened with the companies.
Well, and then what we did is we said the afternoons, we can't do afternoons. Afternoons suck. And so as an instructor, you could not make sense of what you said in the morning and what you said in the afternoon. So you never knew if you were coming or going. And you thought, no, we're going to do one session. And this ain't a race. Is we just got to get the whole workforce on the same page about the way we're going to fix these things. So we went from like going 5 days a week, morning, afternoon, to 3 days a week, morning. This became the schedule. So what we, like Terry said, the oncoming shift commander, so it's B shift, I would just show up to the CTC and I would teach from 8:30 to noon, and then it would be over, and then you go back across the street and do what you're going to do. But every shift, there were three safety officers, chief's aides, whatever you want to call them, who were coming off duty on A shift would report to the CTC overtime. And they would become facilitators for the simulator, right? So the captain, safety officer, chief aide became the simulator at the command training center. And it was all digital combustion. It was hooked up in a control room where you could actually change sims on the fly. You could make them bigger or smaller. You could add frames. You had more capability in that CTC than we got in this one today, truly, as far as being creative with what you're going to demonstrate with people.
It took 2 years to go through that, each function. Because we started
it was about a 5-year process to get through the whole thing.
But when we first started, remember we tried to do, was it 5 years?
Yeah, it took us 5 years. We completed all 8 functions of command over the 5-year period.
Oh my gosh!
Well, we were getting ready to certify people, and that's when the fire chief retired, and all the fallout happened.
Because remember we started, we tried to do it in a quarter, and then the next quarter we do the next function. It's like, why are we doing that?
It was dumb as killing us.
We were trying to get the schedule to drive the curriculum, and said, no, let's not do that. Let's develop the curriculum, figure out how long that takes, and then adjust the schedule to meet the curriculum and the time frame. We were doing it backwards, like we do most things backwards, right?
Yeah, but the beauty of it is, I mean, this is just the way we've worked forever, is we fixed it. As we said, no, we don't like this, we're going to change it to this. Yeah. So, kind of the leadership thing we're doing is kind of the same deal. It's like, no, why do you have these stupid rules that constrict what you're going to do? The beauty of it is all the audience understood this as we all grew up together and knew one another. Yeah. So all the captains coming in to be trained are like, okay, this is going to be interesting. Let's see what the new yahoos do. Right. Well, they saw what we were doing, thought, oh, wow, these guys are like actual B shifters. They're no, this is, in fact, we may have to be careful. They may hurt us eventually here. So
There was a point where they said, if these guys can do it, anybody can. I think.
Well, and there were people that thought that they really did. So when it all stopped and a new group took over, it was really fun to watch. You thought, okay.
Well, the lesson learned as an outsider who was visiting during that time, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought it was to have a small group of people who are going to lead that training. So the three of you guys were the leaders of all that. You were able to work with each other and then push the training and the subjects out, and there wasn't a lot of other convoluted.
Well, you had to keep the consistency in there, because if you, and kind of like what you're doing with Blue Card now, you got a very selective group of instructors that do the train the trainer. So back then there was 3 of us that we were on the same page. We were teaching the same thing. We weren't deviating or going out of that.
You know who I got with me was Hobel. Hobel would come down. He was the only other shift
fourth.
commander that he was the South shift commander. We were North. He was the only one of the South guys that were interested in what we were doing. And he was perfect Pete, the A shift tech.
He could do it.
He was the coach of the softball team. A shift would follow that guy anywhere. Yeah, and so he says, no, I want to be in the room when you're talking tactics. So he had some things that happened, and he ended up on B shift, and so it worked out pretty well.
Did a great job.
But like you said, Vance, that's true, is you had a small group of people that actually kind of figured it out. And then, see, the curriculum was there because it was all the fire command book. And it was so that became what drove it, and then hooking it up to simulations and our volume 2 and all the other stuff. So you had this, I don't know, it was lean and mean, and it was not a lot of people, but it was like having a real big lever that you could use because the whole workforce bought in on it. So like you would do training, and it wouldn't be, as an example, like mandatory training was EMS training, right? If you lost your EMT or paramedic certification, you're off the truck. You're not there anymore. So, and early on, we had a lot of patients with people that would lose their cert, and the department helped get them back. At some point, they just put a line in the sand and said, "No, you're a responsible adult. You got to keep your cert up. If it goes away, you're fired." Basically, there's nowhere for you to work. You got to be a certified medical technician to work on this truck. Yeah, you do. That's the way it goes. So command training was never mandatory. It was like an alternative, voluntary. That's where it fell into the food chain, is they didn't make it a mandatory thing at the time. So as such, if you did training at the academy, company training, and you got over 50% attendance, they said that's 100%. There's no makeup. Move on to the next. At the CTC, we were getting about 85% attendance. And like if a company officer was off, as some of them would like interrupt their vacation and come into training. I mean, it became that important to them. So it became a high value thing for people. Well, there were certain individuals that didn't take that very well because you had a lot of juice teaching out at the CTC as people wanted to show up and learn, okay, what are we going to do here?
Pretty pigs.
We became pretty pigs because it was 100% operational. And it was either put up or shut up. This is what we're supposed to do for a living, and this is how we're going to do it. So you could have like actual intelligent conversations about how fire attack leads the way and everything else is support. And then we do certain things to eliminate hazards, and you search behind it and all the rest of it. Well, it gets everyone on the same page, and there's competing opinions. But at the end of the day, you're like, no, we can cover our differences with the ball cap between what all this thing. Even the lunatic ladder people, they're like, no, I'm going to pole vault to the roof before the ladder stops and cut. Well, you could get them tethered back a little bit where they're actually like semi under control, that you could actually do something with them. So like anybody that wanted power within the organization saw that as a threat, especially because the fire chief's getting ready to retire. So they're like, okay, who's going to take over, and who will the troops listen to? Well, at the CTC, we didn't fall into the new group of leadership. We were the old guys, basically. We were the newest old guys because we were all brand new shift commanders because it was a new position. But they thought, no, you got to get those clowns out of there because they're driven by the work and not really kind of by the whatever drove those assholes. But anyway, so when the old man retired, the first thing they did is they stopped all training across the fire department. Well, they had to reorganize and get control of the fire department as they saw fit. So that's just kind of what the new administration did. So you thought, okay, so that was, but leading up to that period, it was command training had an extremely uniting force, I would say.
Well, and remember how we did it too is pretty awesome, is that we would start with the function of command. So you get everybody in there. You kind of teach about whatever that function was. You would go through a simulation. You talk about that. And then the conversation would kind of shift to whatever the current events that were happening that matched that, but matched all firefighting and all operations. So if people missed something, it was almost like you missed a real important part of the organization organizational conversations that were taking place. So we were actually changing things as they were going, and Bruno gave us the ability to do that. But people showed up for the conversations that took place after the training and the learning that took place after that.
Well, you would continue with after action reviews of incidents that had happened from one session to the next. So, and like if there was like major lessons learned in those things, that's where they would get hashed out. In fact, like with Abbott, as we told them, no, Don, there's no actors in this. The standard conditions are the screens. And if we need to prompt them with something that they need to find out, it's going to be a visual cue on the thing. But mostly they're just reacting to the conditions. And, based on those conditions, there's my actions. Well, what Abbott started doing is he started giving the news nationally about, okay, this is what happened. So if there was a line of duty report. Right. So like the last 3 years, Abbott became, and they look forward to it. It's like there were times he wasn't available. He's somewhere else. He's out of town. Where's Abbott? Well, he's not here. Well, we want to know what the hell, what happened in Charleston last week or whatever it was. So like we had to fill in when he wasn't there to bring him up to the news. It was just, so everybody's role became like integral to the ongoing thing. And like Terry said earlier, there was fewer of us. And so there weren't any conflicts between the instructors. In fact, that was between the three of us, is it didn't matter who it was. Is you were going to get the same basic tactics based on whatever the conditions were. Yeah. And it was, So that worked out pretty well.
Focused on the work.
Focus on the work. Well, and it's important to note that Abbott was a big part of that. So salute to Don Abbott for being our first guest.
Awesome. No, we can tease him about the light bulbs and the whistles and stuff, but everything he did was awesome. And man, he put his heart and soul into everything. He lived there in the building while he was working on.
He's crazy.
Fixing the plane while he was flying it, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Talks about the work and it's Bruno's hierarchy of engagement and really discussing what is a big deal versus what's a little deal.
Right.
So let's talk about big deal versus little deal and how we can focus in on what really matters. We say it's the work, but how do we even focus more on the work and also shed those things that are little deals that really a lot of times leadership gets hung up on, but it's inconsequential.
So, I think a good place to start is to kind of back up a little bit and kind of show where this fits within our program. So if you look at the Silverback Leadership Program, we say there's 8 functions. And the first function is where you just focus on the work. Everything else and all the other functions are going to focus on the work. So when we talk about the hierarchy of engagement, that is actually in the third function. So the first function is the work, focus on the work. That's kind of the most, not kind of, it's absolutely the most important part. Then the second function is the inside-outside customer service, where we kind of introduced Mrs. Smith, and we talked about how we treat our firefighters has a direct impact on how our firefighters treat our customers. And then the third part is where we're really starting to get into the leadership piece. And that third function is personal effectiveness. So how can you be effective as a leader? And we're talking about leadership from the fire chief down. So, and we all have an example of what a good leader and a bad leader is. But we're using, and just to kind of summarize it, one more step, is we're using Bruno's notes, right? So this entire Silverback Leadership Program is based off information that Bruno used throughout his career. So it brings us to his hierarchy of engagement, which he wrote. I didn't change much of it. I think I added on that article, I added critique or after action review just to the bottom of it, just to complete the circle. But it's pretty much the quotes and a lot of the phrases that I use in that article. I didn't come up with those as much as I stole them right out of Bruno's notes, napkins, and knowledge, as we say. So I took that from him, and then if you just look at that, he kind of, I think throughout his career, and you can jump in, Nick, but throughout Bruno's career, he saw leaders so many leaders throughout his career, good ones and bad ones, and he identified what good leaders focus on and what bad leaders focus on. And that's what this engagement list is if you can look at a leader and identify, why is that person ineffective? They got to that position somehow, so they did something right along the way. They had are they resting on their accolades, or did they just quit somewhere along the way? And you just look at them, it's like, what are they focusing on? What I found is the ineffective leaders focus on goofy shit. At one point, they had to be effective in their position, hopefully, but they get to a position of leadership, and it's almost like they reach that, we talk about in the article, the Peter principle. They're still focusing on, they're trying to be the best fire captain or the best firefighter. It's like, no, you're a fire chief. Fire chiefs shouldn't spend a lot of time thinking about uniforms. Uniforms are pretty simple. It doesn't take a lot of brains to figure out. And Bruno says it, we got to have a uniform. The uniform should be recognizable to everybody on the crew or everybody in the department. Mrs. Smith should know what a uniform looks like, but she's not measuring your trousers or looking at how dark your socks are. Or it just gets goofy. She doesn't care if your hat's on right or wrong. She just worries about the customer service that you're providing her. So if you look at that hierarchy of engagement, Bruno breaks it down into ready, get set, and go. And the ready part is the appearance part. It's like, yeah, it's important. We talk about that. It's important to have the right uniform on, but it's not the most critical thing that's going to happen that day, right?
Well, the big deal versus little deal, and I think we see it a lot with brand new fire chiefs. They get the fire chief job, and the first thing they want to do is, we're redesigning the badge. Mm-hmm. Or we're redesigning the lettering on the fire truck, or
the patch.
There's a new patch, and then a whole new uniform standard. And
dress up, man. It's dress up.
Well, and Bruno talked about appearance is just we should appear as firefighters. I mean, people should understand like we don't work for Orca and Pest Control. We work for the fire department. But beyond that, we do all this stuff for us. The jewelry that we wear. Our adornments are for us. And my advice to new fire chiefs when I talk about them is don't worry about any of that stuff, at least for the first. Your problems or your issues are a lot deeper than what your patch or your badge looks like. It should not be the first order of business.
My dad used to talk about they don't send you to fire chief school. There isn't such a place. So you have to learn this all on your own. And he said generals, he used the military as a kind of a similar example. He says the generals have military school they send them to. And he says, we need the same. And he says they found out most generals lose their jobs over two things. They start having sex with their secretary, or they spend a ton of money redecorating their office. And he says both of those is the end of a career for a general. And he said, so they just know not to do it.
So these people that spend a lot of time focusing on uniforms, and it has to do with something about their own self-esteem and their own self-worth. That like maybe the ones that I've heard is how are they going to know who we are if we don't have our uniform on? How are they going to know I'm the fire chief if I don't have the bugles and the
That's what they make business cards for.
Right. Or how about you act a certain way, right? Why don't you act like a fire chief and worry and go out and worry about the things that are important, not worry about a uniform. But I think, the way people are dressed is important. We talk about that. The way people, but it's not, I'm going to tell a little story here. My head's spinning because I wrote that article and I'm thinking about all the things I can say about it. And when you think about
your best story was in the article.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember being at a fire, and after the fire, I was sitting in the Suburban. I was a shift commander that day, but I was the incident commander. Mm-hmm. I was actually the support officer because Sid Norwood was the incident commander. And I was, a guy comes walking up to me from an engine company. And he comes up, and he's an engineer on one of the companies. He comes up, he's got a full beard. And he goes, and he walks up to I'm in Phoenix, and he walks up, he goes, hey, Terry, how's it going? I go, fine, brother, what are you up to? And he goes, I'm doing fine. I said, how's things going? He goes, fine. How's your wife? My wife's fine. Hey, you did a good job on the fire. Thank you very much. Hey, do me a favor. Send your captain over here, will you? Okay. And he's very nice when he gives me a little high five, and he walks back. Captain comes up. I said, hey, your engineer's got to be. I didn't want to say anything to the engineer. I want to see the story.
How this is going to unfold, man.
And I've never seen the guy with the beard. I've known him for 20 years. All of a sudden, this day he's got a beard.
And he would be the only member in the operation divisions wearing a beard that day too.
Listen to this. So he comes up and his captain goes, I said, hey, your engineer's got a beard. And it's like 8 a.m. He goes,
So he had like a full ass beard.
Yeah, full ass beard. He grew it on his 2 days off.
Come on, Terry. So he hadn't shaved.
No, Nick, you could grow that beard in 2 days. It'd take me a month, but it was a full, it wasn't a non-shave.
It was noticeable.
It was a beard, dude. And he comes up and I think, so anyway, I asked the captain, I said, hey, did you notice your engineer has a beard? And he goes, yeah, I saw that. And I said, what are you going to do about that? He goes, well, when I get him back to the station, I'm going to make him shave it. And I said, okay, yeah, that'd be a pretty good idea. He goes, well, you know why he's got the beard? I go, oh, there's a reason why he grew a beard? Yeah.
He's in a band. He's just joined a band?
Because the captain on the shift that they relieve has a full beard. I go, the captain on I can't remember what shift I was working at. I think I was a C shift. The captain on B shift has a beard?
Yeah, I would have said that probably. Yeah. If there was going to be a beard.
He's got a full beard. I go, okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'll talk to my relief.
Well, I'll talk to the relief. So I think actually Smut grew a beard. And
really?
And somebody just to challenge somebody, because he could grow one in an afternoon, right?
Okay.
And then one of those, and it's like, oh God. So I mean, when you see something that's really out of the sort, take the time, correct it. We're not saying that uniforms aren't a critical part. We're saying leaders shouldn't focus and spend a lot of time worrying about uniform. In fact, how many out there in the world do you have a uniform committee? Do you have something going on right now where somebody within your department is doing something with the uniform? There's somebody within your department takes the lead. They want to get a new badge. They want to get a new patch. They want to change the color on the fire engine, something that has nothing to do with the work itself and how much time and energy do you really spend doing that. And you'll have 10 to 12 people within a room spending 6 to 8 hours. If you just looked at the cost of that, it would be remarkable. And that's where they want to focus. And you want to take those same people and say, no, go to training.
No, uniform lunch.
What's that?
Uniform lunch.
Oh, yeah.
There's your story. We'll put a sword through uniforms now. This is it.
Yeah. So
no more talk after this on uniforms.
Yes. Yeah. So here's the deal. I'm in a department. And same thing, I hear a lot about uniforms. I hear about baseball caps. I hear about T-shirts. I hear about Class B uniforms. You can't wear a skull cap unless the temperature hits a certain degree. You can't wear a baseball hat inside. One guy couldn't wear a baseball hat inside, although he had cancer on his head and the lights hurt him. But the rule says you can't wear a baseball cap inside. It's like, really? Have you ever been to a freaking baseball game? They're inside. They wear hats.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm all kinds of uniforms. I do not want to start my career in this fire department talking about uniforms. I don't want to talk about it. So I come back to Phoenix for whatever reason, and I'm meeting with Bruno. And whenever I come back, I would have lunch with Bruno or breakfast. This case, it was breakfast. Then I meet with him and I go, oh, Bruno. He goes, how's it going, Chief G? And I said, I shake my hand. I go, hey, can we talk about uniform? I need your help. He goes, well, let's talk about some other things first. So we sit down and we eat and we talk. We're there for an hour and a half, right? My ass is numb. I've sat there so long. And we talked about everything. Well, I completely forgot about the uniform issue. I was just happy to be there, and he counseled me on everything else and walked me off the cliff on a few other issues. So I was getting up to leave. He was paying the check, and he goes, and I said, okay, thanks, Bruno. He goes, hold it, time out. He goes, don't you want to talk about uniforms? I go, oh, I forgot. I sat back down. He says to me, he goes, first of all, how was your food? I said, man, it was delicious. Thank you very much. He goes, and how was the service? I said, it was awesome, man. She did a great job. He goes, and what was she wearing? I said, I don't know. And he goes, uniform. Puts his thumb up, uniform. That was my uniform talk.
Love it.
That's uniforms, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Focus on the work. focus on how you treat people. Mrs. Smith does not care if somebody's T-shirt is not quite blue enough. She cares about the service you deliver to her and her family. And that's it. That's a true story that, man, I tell you what, the light bulb went, boom. Thank you, Bruno.
On a more important side of that issue is readiness. Right. And that's something that I took from him. And we used to say battle ready, and we had a bunch, but it's making sure that the crews are ready to go. The equipment's in the truck that needs to be in the truck. We've got fuel. We've got water. We're ready to render service. So let's talk readiness and how that should just eclipse anything with uniforms and some of the other stuff that we get involved in.
Mm-hmm. It's much more important, right? This is where you actually form work groups and work on issues to make sure that you're ready to do the job. You can include training in this. I mean, this is where we didn't list it on our list of hierarchy of it, but that's where training would fit. Is you want to be ready to do the job. You want people to be capable to do the job. And in our organization, readiness always also focused on with Bruno, it was kind of interesting because whenever you would talk with him, and it took me years to figure this out. There's always a conversation about readiness, about training, and the customer. But then there was a little bit thrown in there that took a little while for me to understand. There was also about character. And he would slip that in on you, like how you deliver the service to Mrs. Smith, how you, later it was obvious, be nice. That became such a critical statement. But even early on, like you deliver the service, what's it take to be ready? I thought that was really important too. But no, I think readiness is an important part of that hierarchy. But there's even a level higher than that, or a level more critical than that.
Well,
right?
it would be the added value piece. So like the readiness, see, like talking about you've got to have an EMS certification to ride a fire truck that delivers EMS. Mm-hmm. So that's part of readiness. Well, in most fire departments, the fire department has all the systems to keep you trained. You have to have the, I don't know what you even call it, maturity to go through and say, okay, I have to maintain this certification as part of my readiness. And if I lose this, I can't do this anymore. So that would kind of be a bigger issue one. But, then that goes all the way down to having your turnouts on the truck, make sure your SCBA's got air in it, all those other things that I can do my job as I need to.
As a fire chief, I spent a lot of time talking with city managers and elected officials about readiness, getting the firefighters ready to do the job. Mm-hmm. And I think if I would have spent a little more time talking about the actual work, because I spent a lot of time talking about we need to have apparatus that allows us to be ready to do our job. We need to have equipment and turnouts that gets us ready to do our job. We need to have training that gets us ready to do our job. And all that takes a lot of resources, right? That's the front end stuff that you need to take care of so you can go out and deliver that job. So there's probably a lot of fire chiefs and that spend a lot of time having conversations about readiness. And my advice to them is if you could tie that readiness conversation quickly into providing the service, then those elected officials who really don't have a clue what firefighters do, regardless of what you think, they could sit and nod at you, city managers and elected officials, and pretend like they know what firefighters really do on a scene. But until you break down an incident and talk to them about what a firefighter actually does to perform their work and why this is all important for them to perform their work. And I think we've talked about it before, where a great way to do that is with some sort of program where you take the elected officials in to a training session and they do the crawl down and get them helmets, get them turnouts, go ahead.
Put them under heat lamps.
Yeah. But actually show them what it takes to do the job. And this is why we need good physical training programs. This is why we need to have physicals once a year. This is why firefighters get sick. This is why firefighters get injured, because they're doing all this type of work. So if you tie the readiness conversation to the the work conversation, I think it pays off. I believe so.
The Fire Ops 101 that the union does is,
That's
I think,
it.
a home run.
That's it.
You know, when they do that
You'll get support from your elected officials.
they understand. You know,
but they forget. You got to
Yeah.
do it about every couple of years.
So skipping ahead to get set, you know, we're talking about some things in get set. One of the things you talk about is, you know, adherence to routine, and then you get into some effectiveness stuff. So how is that important with the adherence to routine, and how does that tie in?
Well, I think
with
that mold
effectiveness?
and it probably is where I'm talking training too. I think that kind of rolls right into that, right? Ready and get set. They kind of roll together in there. What did you say, Nick, when we were talking earlier? You used a different analogy rather than ready, get set, and go.
Ready, aim, fire.
Yeah. So if the get set part is, it's not in the article, but when Nick when him and I had a conversation earlier today, he used the aim part for the get ready.
See, because what happens a lot of times is they'll do ready, fire, aim.
Yeah, right.
You know, that's the fast aggressive thing. Is we don't stop long enough to figure out, okay, what should we do here? Right. And you know, once you do that, you think, okay, this is what I need to do, and then you can do it and you're done. Where the ready aimed fire, where the other you're going to have to redo. It's going to take longer to get your whatever objective it is you want to hit.
You know, whenever you're accomplishing anything, that get ready part, our get set part is really important, right? Whether you're running a race or playing a sport or doing your job, is that middle piece is absolutely critical. And I think that, and Bruno thought that leaders could spend a great deal of time within that area, right? And that's what we were talking about, is right in that area where the sweet spot where you got to get them ready to go. And
well, if you look at it like shift change and starting your shift is get ready. And that's where you put all your gear on the truck and you make sure everything works. So now I'm ready. Then you get dispatched on whatever call. That's where you aim and think, okay, we're going on an EMS call. We're going on a fire call. We're going on a multi-unit response call. So the engineer knows where they're going. Everybody's belted in. Right. If they need turnouts, they're turned out before they get on the truck, that kind of stuff. So you're ready, and then we're set, we're going. So we're aiming, and then go is when they set the air brake, and you're doing your thing then. So,
yeah. And Bruno identifies behavior as an important part in that get set, right? People's behavior, their actions. You know, how often do you hear people say, and we talked about it here on the show before, but, you know, how do you manage attitude? And you say, okay, well,
lackadaisical,
yeah,
it's a stupid call, what am I doing?
Bad attitude. Well, what kind of bad attitudes he has? Well, he shows up late. Well, that's not an attitude. That's a behavioral issue. That's an action. You need to fix that piece. Well, he doesn't check his equipment every day. He's got a bad attitude. He doesn't turn his bottles on in the morning to check his air bottle. Well, that's not attitude. That's behavior. So that behavior on that get set part is absolutely critical, because that's going to lead into the next piece. So people start getting really lackadaisical about that. So as supervisors, I mean, I've seen the best supervisors that I've seen is the ones that do that with you. They'll get out there with you in the morning and make sure you check all your equipment. The best battalion chiefs are the ones that show up at your station and ask you, what do you need to get ready and get set, right? What do you need? Are you ready? What can I do for you to help you get set? And then they make sure they take care of you and they're more to support it. I think for a leader, that's really a pretty important supportive position right there, is helping somebody get set prior to go.
Well, and I think you put like the critique after action review in as the final loop of that. And I think that's where you validate all the get ready, get set, go piece of it. So as an example, you do an incident operation. You had burn victims and all kinds of stuff happens during a non-standard time. And the first company there was a minute and a half away. They were driving by when the call got spit out. It wasn't their first due. But at the end of the incident, you had, I don't know, 4 victims, all transported to the hospital. The after-action review come out, okay, we had this house burning. It was rocking and rolling. We had 4 victims. 20 minutes later, we got fire control, all clear, and the 4th victim was being dropped off at the hospital. That's ready, set, go, right there. Right. We did what we said we were going to do. We showed up and did our jobs. I mean, there ain't nothing better than that juice right there. We said we're pirate bee shifters. We're good to go. It's its own reward at that point. I mean, it's like a tonic, almost like a vitamin to do that. And it brings everybody closer together, all the ranks. It's like, oh, no, we're all part of the same thing. It's not us and them. It's us. It's just us. There's no them.
You talk about that adherence to routine. When I saw that, and I didn't put it in the article because the article can only be so long, but you think routine, the routine that the organization, the membership kind of adopts, that becomes the culture, right? The best definition of culture I ever heard are the way things are done around here. You can see that in a crew, you can see that in a battalion, you can see that in an organization, but the way things are done around here, that's where you're actually describing your culture. So if your routine becomes, this is the way we care about the customer, this is the way we care about our fellow firefighters, this is the way we care about ourselves in that routine part, you can really start developing some bad habits in the routine that are not going to change when you get in a hazard zone. Like if people aren't checking their equipment every day, and this is just an example, or a battalion chief's not having conversations about culture every day, when they get on a scene, they're not going to be able to change that. You can't kick somebody's ass right then and right there to get them to do the right thing. That has to be created through that routine and that culture that you develop over a period of time. And so when I was a fire chief in the departments I worked in, I would come in and I would look at the routine and I would start to have conversations about what do they think is important. If you're a new fire chief, go in and just listen. And have people come in and talk to you and say, okay, I want to interview my executive command team and see what they're talking about. What are they really talking? And you know what? Sometimes they're talking about uniforms. Sometimes they're talking about budget. Sometimes they're talking about how screwed up they think the labor group is or whatever. And you say, okay, what do I really want them talking about? I want them to talk about Mrs. Smith. I want them to talk about firefighters. I want them to talk about training. I want them to talk about safety. So the routine becomes the typical conversations. And the fire chiefs are going to have a difficult time over the next 5 months keeping their members focused on the job and not on the politics of the country.
Oh, yeah.
And they're going to have to say, we got to turn off the TVs. We can't have conversations like that because that's going to become the routine, and the routine is going to become mean-spirited back and forth. And then somebody's going to get hurt on a fire ground, and you're going to feel terrible about it because, firefighters, it's always funny. You'll argue with somebody and hate their guts across the table over politics, but you would save that same guy in a fire 13 minutes from now. Mm-hmm. So why would we treat each other like that? So fire chiefs need to get a handle on that culture that's going to take, and it's probably already taken place. You just left your fire chief.
Well, it's so distracting. It really is. And I saw it, starting a few years back. And that's why we started putting ESPN on the TV and saying, let's stay. We talk to the officers about that because
it's going to get worse.
Because we know where it's going. We know where it is. And, when I started in the fire service in 1991, they didn't talk about politics at all at the firehouse. I mean, I don't remember.
Oh, we did all the time.
I didn't.
In 1980.
We didn't talk about it.
I mean, we were heavily unionized, and it was mostly local, and how it affected the fire department. As far as like national politics, we were all over the page. Yeah. I mean, there was more Second Amendment people in a fire department than there are First Amendment people. It's just kind of the way it's set up. I don't.
I asked an old salty dog, Ted Ondercheck, once. I said, hey, because he came on, and he's a Vietnam era guy and came on in the 60s, best fire captain I ever worked for. And I said, what did you guys, like all the politics and everything that's taken place, I said, what'd you talk about when you came on? He goes, oh, yeah, we had some serious battles. We had some serious FU battles. I said, what about? He goes, are you about a bass fisherman or trout?
Hunting, fishing,
you walk
Ford or Chevy. I mean,
you walk a stream. No, I sit in a boat and drink beer. Those are the two kinds of.
But
that was what they argued about.
There was a paramedic duo. See, because these problems have been with us, and not even problems, they're issues. It's just people are different, and they have to learn how to get along together. Is one of my least favorite bosses I ever had, who just wasn't very good at his job, had been a paramedic, and his former partner had transgendered from being a man to a woman and quit. So we blame that on him, that you're so bad at it that look what you did to him. So anyway, but I mean, this was in the late 70s when that happened. So it's not like this just occurred. I mean, it's been going on forever. And like Ted said, is a lot of times, because it is your second family. In fact, for some people, it was really their first family. Yeah. In fact, I was reading some tactical truths from somebody wrote one day, and he talked about don't let your personal life screw up your occupational life. I thought, I wonder who wrote that. Anyway.
Or vice versa.
Yeah. Well, I knew where he was going. But nonetheless, it's... So a lot of times we're learning together and having to process this new information and new cultural phenomenons. And that's where like the older generation doesn't like the younger generation, who doesn't like the older generation. And that's all bullshit. I mean, you're all people, and if we're all in a room together and you're like an infant and every generation's represented, that's the beauty of our work. Is you set a fire in there and it's going to kill them all just as fast. Mm-hmm. We were talking the other day about these like smoke jumper schools they have, and that they honestly believe that somehow they're immune to smoke that regular people aren't. But you never stop being a biological unit, and like cyanide and carbon monoxide kills everybody equally. So we're all the same like that, but somehow we don't think we are at the end of the day. So it becomes confused. Well, and if people start to daydream that they're like a snuffleupagus instead of a captain on a ladder truck, that's going to create some issues in service delivery at some point. Yeah.
I only need to breathe 5 times a minute.
Yeah.
So if you're, we talk about ready, get set, go. If your get set level of routine, adherence to routine, focuses on the go, and that becomes your primary object. Because think about it, that's the whole get set of every sport or whatever it is. When they're in the blocks right now, we got track and field. I love to watch that because I can't run. I ran once, a guy caught me and beat me up. I quit running. But if you see that, they're getting ready because they're getting set because of what they're going to do. So the get set part focuses on the go part, and actually doing the work will be so much better. But a lot of people's routine focuses on something that has nothing to do with the work, focuses back to the uniform, focuses on, like when you have a fire department that is more worried about the political landscape, and I think the unions are very important, and I've had great union partnership. But you can't get caught up in the political piece that the union gets caught up. Let them do their political piece, and you manage the fire department and work together within that. But a lot of fire chiefs get too caught up in the political part too, and they lose focus of the organization. And then it's live or die based on who the next politician is, who got voted based on. I don't like that at all. And I don't think fire chiefs should get involved with any kind of politics, any of that. You have your own opinion, you vote, they seal those envelopes for a reason, keep them sealed and mail them in, but nobody needs to know how you feel about that.
Well, between
fire chief.
Between the set and go, there's things you do to prepare yourself. So I was like a company officer responding. The first engine gets there and keys up. Engine 13 clear. So you know they're getting ready to give an initial radio report. You're looking at the Second World War on the horizon. I mean, there's shit blowing up. It's going crazy. And you're starting to get jacked. For me, it was to be ready as I had to calm myself down. So I would close my eyes and take 3. I control my breathing, do breathing exercises. And then took 15, 30 seconds. And then you're reset. You're not jacked anymore. You can actually feel your pulses drop. You're like, okay, now I can think clearly. This isn't affecting me. I'm going to do whatever's going to be the best for all of us. So I promote to battalion chief, and I think, well, I'm no longer a ladder captain, so I don't have to go off and do kung fu to fire and all that other stuff we did. So you're responding, and they clear alarm, and you think, Jesus Christ, they put some water on it sooner than later. Oh, it's getting bigger. And I scream, and it's so distracting to them. And I'm like, okay, let's close my eyes, take 3 deep breaths. They're like, I just don't give a shit anymore. This is going to go well. So it was, for me, it was having to disconnect myself from whatever I was getting ready to respond to. Yeah. So it's like, no, you can't, your ego, wherever that is inside, you got to take that out, and you're just going to be the captain who reacts to stimuli.
You know, the other thing to say about that get set and the routine piece is how many people out there that are listening work in a fire department where if you have 2 battalions, you have 2 different departments. If you have 3 shifts and 2 battalions, you have 6 different departments. Mm-hmm. In Houston, we had 22 divisions on 4 shifts. That would be 88 different departments in the city of Houston.
You ain't going to get much mail delivered there.
So I think it's important that the leaders in those type of organizations, and all organizations, their primary focus is trying to get consistency throughout their entire organization. Now, that's hard in Houston. It can be done, and I think everybody wants it done who's in that system. Let's say 98% of the people want it done. There's always those people who like to throw bricks. You know what Bruno used to say? One brick thrower can outperform 100 bricklayers, a well-placed brick thrower. But I think most people in that system, so trying to get consistency throughout that, and that was what back to your comment early on about why was there such a small group of instructors at the CTC, is because we were trying to get, how many battalions did we have at the time, Nick? 10 battalions on 3 shifts.
9 or 10. If you take the airport out, you had 9.
I would have said 7. That's why I looked at you.
Because it kept going up. We had 3 shift commanders at one point. But, I mean, that was at the end of
But the key is to get that all. So as a fire chief and a higher level executive, if you can get that consistency, and the best way to do, I found the best way to get everybody on the same page is through training.
Yeah. Terry, that being said, you were a paramedic. You worked with a lot of paramedics. Standardized training program.
Yes.
Same final evals. You had to do the same shit.
Yeah, right.
Some paramedics, you and I could both name probably the same people. If something happened to us or one of our loved ones, we would name the same 4 or 5 paramedics we wanted treating them.
And the 2 that we don't.
Exactly. Yeah. So, now that is the strongest system I've ever seen. Is the EMT paramedic system for making those positions out of firefighters. And even that has so you have to have a lot of after action review and work to make sure that they can all start lines. They all interpret the data the same way. They do the same treatment protocols. So it's a full-time job just keeping all of them on track, let alone the stragglers.
And if you look back to that, Nick, that is the medical equivalent to you find standard conditions, you apply a standard action, you get a standard outcome.
Oh, Blue Card does the same thing for you tactically.
Exactly
without a doubt.
Where I was going.
Yeah.
That is why that is so important. But you want to get your organization on the same page, bring them together, focus on the work, and train to do that work, have conversations about doing that work, find out who is not doing that work, similar to everybody else in the way you want it, and then you'll talk I think that would be our function number 8, managing boundaries within an organization and the silverback leadership that we'll talk about somewhere down the road. But really, that's the key. That's why that adherence to routine is in there. It's so absolutely important.
Well, and Blue Card is old enough now, and departments will come in and out of it, that I've had people that have been doing Blue Card a long time that say, I know my neighbors aren't doing CE anymore. I can tell. As after about 3 months, the radio traffic starts to drift in the wrong way. Yeah. And it's not as descriptive. It takes longer. You're not getting the information you need. And and you see it. It's the same thing would happen on the medical side if you could let your medical lapse. Most fire departments think, oh, we're medically trained forever. We're not doing it anymore. You think, no, to keep your skill level ready, you have to be competent in these levels. And that takes review of past incidents to keep it up to where you want it to be, to operate at a higher level.
Well, this is a great article, and I really want everyone to read it. Look in the show notes.
And remember,
there's a link to it.
And remember, this is Bruno's information that we are repackaging up and adding a little bit of our own color to it. But this is information that he learned and practiced for 50 years in the fire service. And it's really good. And then the last part is the go part, where you just, if you got everything lined up, you can focus on the go. And leaders don't focus on. Just because you're in the same uniform doesn't make the uniformity, doesn't encourage uniformity. But creating a culture where you care about each other and you care about the work, and then you focus on that creates uniformity in the work, right? I interrupted you, but you were starting to make me uncomfortable with what you were saying about the article. But it's a Bruno article all the way.
Well, it's a great article. So look in the show notes. We have one more order of business before we adjourn for the day.
Hey now.
Timeless tactical truth from Alan Brunacini. When there is a problem, fix it. Don't blame. When it is fixed, act, look, talk happy. Don't be unhappy just so people know you're the boss. Be a happy boss.
Have you ever worked for a boss who you know doesn't like you? Mm-hmm. It's a terrible feeling. I didn't for Bruno for years, but there was people between Bruno and I that I knew didn't like me. They were mean-spirited, and it's like they look for problems. And then because you want to people want to make their boss happy. Even when I was working for a city manager that I just could not agree with because they wanted to cut staffing to firefighters, he was my boss. I still wanted to make him happy. And it seemed like sometimes when things didn't go right, he stayed unhappy even though I corrected the issue a very long time, thinking now he's living with that. Don't be that guy, right?
Yeah.
You spend a lot of time worrying about what was already fixed. I think that's what Bruno.
Yeah.
Remember when Bruno fixed us a couple times and then he went away, and Bruno fixed people. Bruno, he did not.
I don't know. I'm sitting right here, buddy.
Explain.
No, he didn't fix it.
I'm going to have to. I'm going to need a refund.
He didn't fix family, but if you were a fire chief working for him, he had expectations about behavior.
Oh, okay.
And
yes.
if you did not act in a certain way, he would fix you right there, and then he would move on. And he did it in a way where the person that got fixed could move on very easily with it, like we've been fixed. Or you can live with that like it's a tumor in you. But he forgot about it. I truly believe that he kind of went on past that. And I'd seen people within the organization that got fixed, and he fixed them, corrected their behavior, and for some reason, man, years later, it just tormented him.
Well, he was more of an advocate. And it's like, no, you're doing like therapy almost. Is you keep stepping on this rake. Why do you do that all the time? So, but the water would flow both ways. I remember it was very early in my career. I had like 2 years on, and he was picking me up for some reason. We were going to go to some fire department thing. I don't remember what it was, but somehow he ended up in the dorm, and I'm dressed, ready to go, and my bed's not put away yet. So I just rolled my stuff up and stuffed it in the locker. It did not take 5 seconds. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, well, we're going to wherever, admin. He says, no, that you just unmade your bed. I said, uh-huh. And he says, you don't fold your blankets? I said, no, they're first aid blankets. They're they were made out of 100% unidentified materials. When you get up, you'd have little fuzzballs all over
They've
you.
never been washed.
Yeah. I said, no, why would I do that? Because, like, I'm going to come back next shift. I'm going to throw it down. I'm going to roll it out, and then it's ready to go. And you could tell it pissed him off. And the longer it went, and finally, like a month or two later, he says, I've been doing this wrong the whole time. Is we used to fold them, but it doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't you just roll it up like that? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, you really have been thinking about this? I mean, well, yeah. I think. Well, you must have all this other shit figured out to this level that it's just little things that your crazy children are doing that you're having to come to grips with. Yeah.
Probably he realized, I don't know if this is true, but the moment you told him why you did it, he probably thought you were right, and then spent a lot of time trying to figure out why you were right.
Yeah, exactly. But little things like that did like just the simplest things. He would stop, and sometimes you could see he was still thinking about it later. And it's like, and a lot of times he would just you're wrong and that's not right. And but occasionally you could pull him in.
Is he talking about tyrant bosses though too? Like the boss that they have to correct a problem, but then they come back and they're just angry all day. Or it's the moody boss or.
You know people like that. When you walk up to them, the first thing they want to say something negative to you
all the time,
and it's just like the first thing I was like, really, you're going to wear that shirt, or really you're going to do your hair like, or really I saw the way. It's like there's just people that are like that, and it's worse when they're your boss.
I think it's a personal issue with them mostly. They're just an upset, angry individual, and they just happen to be your boss too.
And you remember we told that story that Bruno said to that one fire captain when he was sitting there and he was looking all grouchy and everything. And Bruno goes, you in a good mood? He goes, yeah. He goes, really? Because you're not smiling. No, I'm in a good mood. He goes, oh, well, why don't you tell your face? That was my favorite.
Yeah, he could do that.
All right.
So that's
Well, let's put a bow on it. Anything else, guys, before we go? All right.
Nothing.
No, Vance, I strongly recommend cutting the whole last 2-3 minutes out.
Leave me alone.
I'm angry.
I don't want to do it anymore.
All right. Thanks for listening to the B Shifter podcast. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, indeed.